Once you start gardening, it doesn't take long to realize just how many pests are out there, ready to nibble, dig, or destroy everything you've planted. It's not a modern problem. Gardeners in the past dealt with the exact same challenges. Over time, they came up with smart, simple, and surprisingly effective ways to keep pests under control using whatever they had on hand. In this video, we've gathered 15 old-school pest control tricks that your grandparents, or even their grandparents, used to protect their gardens. Mole crickets are a nightmare for gardeners. They tunnel just below the surface and destroy roots before plants can settle in. One of the smartest traps didn't need bait at all. Gardeners would take an old metal rain gutter, cut it into short vertical sections, and bury them so that the top stuck out just above ground level. At the bottom, they placed a small container, like a tin can or a glass jar. When mole crickets hit the slick, smooth walls of the gutter, they'd slide straight down and fall into the container, unable to climb back out. It worked like a charm, especially when placed near freshly planted beds or in moist soil where mole crickets are active. It's a trick that uses nothing but gravity, friction, and a bit of clever setup, and it's still just as effective today. Slugs cause serious damage in many gardens. They chew through leaves, leave slime trails, and hide during the day, making them hard to catch. One low-tech trick that gardeners have relied on for generations involves beer traps. This method uses small jars or dishes buried so the rim is level with the soil. Pour in some beer, and that's all it takes. The smell attracts slugs. They slide in, and they can't get back out. It's not a pretty trap, but it's cheap, easy, and highly effective. Set out a few around your garden, especially in shady, damp spots where slugs like to hide. Old boards, thick mulch, and rocks are good places to check. Change the beer every couple of days and empty out the traps in the morning. Birds can be a real problem in the garden, pulling up young plants, stealing fruit, or scratching through mulch. While some gardeners chase them off with noise or reflective objects, others used a quieter solution. One classic trick involved placing life-sized wooden or metal cutouts of predators, like cats or birds of prey, around the garden. These silhouettes were often painted black and mounted on posts, so they'd stand tall among the plants. To the birds, they looked like a lurking threat, something best avoided. Some gardeners even moved them around every few days to keep birds from getting used to them. They were simple, silent, and reusable, a passive form of defense that didn't rely on sound, motion, or nets. Aphids love to cluster on the tender parts of plants, the undersides of leaves, new shoots, or flower buds. They suck out sap and leave behind sticky residue, attracting ants and spreading disease. Before chemical sprays, gardeners made their own soap solutions at home. A bit of natural bar soap or mild dish soap mixed into water was enough. Sprayed directly onto the insects, the soapy water breaks down their protective coating and dries them out. It doesn't hurt the plant, but it works fast on soft-bodied pests. It's important to spray early in the morning or late in the afternoon so the sun doesn't scorch the wet leaves. This simple method lets you control aphids without hurting beneficial bugs or loading your plants with residue. Pest control doesn't always mean traps or sprays. Sometimes it starts with smart planting. Gardeners often line their garden beds with onions and garlic, not just for food, but for protection. These strong-smelling plants help mask the scent of more vulnerable crops, making it harder for pests to locate them. Their sulfur compounds also acted as a natural repellent, especially against aphids, root maggots, and some beetles. By planting garlic and onions around the edges of raised beds or near key crops like carrots and lettuce, gardeners created a kind of a living fence. It looked good, produced useful food, and quietly kept trouble away without much effort. Even today, this kind of companion planting is a smart way to use space and reduce problems naturally. Nasturtiums are colorful and cheerful, but in the garden, they've long had another purpose: sacrifice. Gardeners planted them on purpose to attract pests away from other vegetables. Aphids, cabbage worms, and flea beetles love nasturtiums. When the plants are growing nearby, the pests gather there instead of spreading across the whole garden. Once heavily infested, the nasturtiums can be trimmed back or removed entirely, taking the problem with them. This method works best when nasturtiums are planted early in the season and placed near crops like kale, broccoli, or beans. It's a form of pest control that doesn't kill, but redirects. Plus, the flowers are edible and beautiful, making them one of the most useful double-duty plants you can grow. We've talked about scaring birds away with silhouettes, and before that, how beer traps help with slugs. But here's the other side of the story. Not all critters are the enemy. Some birds and bats are actually your allies in pest control. Bats feed heavily on moths, mosquitoes, and other flying insects, while many birds love to snack on slugs, caterpillars, and beetles. That's why older gardeners often mounted simple nesting boxes on fences, trees, or shed walls. These gave helpful animals a reason to stay close. It might sound like a contradiction. One minute you're chasing birds off with scarecrows, and the next you're building them a home. But it's all about balance. Scare away the troublemakers and welcome the helpers. Done right, this kind of natural partnership keeps problems under control with almost no extra effort on your part. Next up is one of the most destructive insects in American gardens, the squash vine borer. This insect lays its eggs at the base of squash plants, and when the larvae hatch, they tunnel straight into the stems. A plant that looked perfectly healthy one day can suddenly wilt and collapse the next. Old-time gardeners learned to fight back with simple hands-on techniques. One method was to wrap the lower part of each squash stem with strips of cloth, aluminum foil, or even old pantyhose. This barrier made it harder for the adult moths to lay their eggs where the larvae could cause damage. Others would dust the base of the plant with wood ash or diatomaceous earth, both acting as mild natural repellents. Marigolds have been a garden staple for generations, not just because they're colorful, but because they actually work. These flowers release compounds into the soil that repel nematodes, and their strong scent confuses pests like whiteflies and aphids. Gardeners tuck them in between vegetables or around the edges of rows. They didn't just look good, they earned their keep. Some even planted dense borders of marigolds around the entire plot. French marigolds were especially popular for pest control, while larger African varieties added bold color. It's a simple example of companion planting that works across the board. Fewer pests, healthier soil, and a garden that's easier on the eyes. Colorado potato beetles can strip a patch down to bare stems in no time. They're fast breeders, and both the adults and the bright orange larvae feed aggressively on leaves. Back then, gardeners didn't rely on sprays. They had a simpler method. Many just picked them off by hand. Early in the morning, when beetles moved slowly, they'd walk the rows with a small jar of soapy water and drop the beetles in one by one. They also checked for clusters of yellow eggs on the undersides of leaves and crushed them before they hatched. It might sound tedious, but for small gardens, it was fast, effective, and didn't cost a thing. Kids were often given this job, sometimes turning it into a game. Who could collect the most beetles? It's still one of the best ways to deal with an outbreak if you catch it early before the damage spreads. Moving up to a bigger garden menace, deer. They don't just eat your vegetables, they trample rows, nibble buds, and leave chaos behind. For many gardeners, this wasn't just an occasional nuisance. It meant serious losses overnight. To keep them at bay, many turned to simple homemade solutions. One trick that worked surprisingly well involved hanging pieces of strong-smelling soap from stakes or branches. Gardeners would cut bars into chunks, wrap them in breathable cloth or mesh, and tie them around the edges of the garden. The scent confused deer and kept them from venturing closer. Some used scented soap for extra punch, while others stuck with basic laundry bars. Sometimes the best pest control comes from attracting the right bugs. Dill, with its fine leaves and umbrella-shaped flowers, is a magnet for beneficial insects. Lacewings, ladybugs, and parasitic wasps are all drawn to its blooms, and these insects feed on aphids, caterpillars, and other soft-bodied pests. Gardeners planted dill near crops like tomatoes, peppers, and brassicas, not just for flavor, but as a form of natural pest management. The flowers kept the air alive with helpful insect activity, making the garden more balanced without needing sprays or traps. Dill is easy to grow, reseeds itself if left to flower, and fits neatly into the corner of any bed. To control pests, some gardeners turn to an unexpected helper: ducks. Letting a few ducks roam the garden during the day turned them into full-time bug patrol. They loved slugs, beetles, caterpillars, and weed seedlings. With a little guidance or fencing, ducks could move through rows without harming most plants. Some gardeners didn't even need to train them. They simply chose breeds like Indian runner ducks, which naturally prefer bugs over greens and tend to leave the plants alone. Others used ducks between growing seasons or guided them away from tender crops. It wasn't just about pest control. Ducks added personality to the garden, laid eggs, and turned bugs into breakfast. Moles and voles can ruin a garden from below, digging tunnels, eating roots, and collapsing rows of plants. But some gardeners had a clever way to keep them out, without poison or traps. They'd bury empty glass bottles upside down, with just the neck sticking up above the soil. When the wind passed over the opening, it made a faint whistling sound. That vibration traveled down through the bottle and into the soil. It didn't seem loud to humans, but underground it was enough to bother burrowing pests. The constant hum made the area feel active and unsafe. It was easy to try, free to set up, and kind of charming in its simplicity, like a tiny wind-powered alarm system hiding in plain sight. Wireworms are sneaky pests that live in the soil and chew through roots, tubers, and seeds underground. Because they're hard to spot, gardeners used bait traps to detect and reduce their numbers. One of the simplest tricks was burying a chunk of raw potato a few inches deep, especially in early spring before planting. After a few days, they'd dig it up and find the wireworms gathered inside. It worked like a magnet. The trap didn't kill them, but it showed where the problem areas were, and let gardeners remove dozens at once. Some repeated the process weekly until the pressure dropped. It's low-tech, low-cost, and still one of the smartest ways to manage a pest you almost never see until it's too late.